We've got the two of you who wrote half this stuff. We've got a real certified FRC historian, and we've got us two clowns up here. So,
and we've been through this.
We already watched this.
Yeah, you guys were there. Cool. So first of all, thanks for coming to our TED Talk.
Woo!
We are here to talk about strategy,
Yes.
and more importantly, how game design affects your choices as you move through a season.
So I was a student until 2022 on the same team, and then I came back to mentor. I mainly do like strategy and mech design, project management stuff.
I graduated way back in 2013 from this team. I still mentor, but I moved down to San Diego, so I'm also now with 8891. And you'll see I did like half a season with 1648 out in Atlanta, just with some work moves.
And then we'd like to thank Mr. Shiro, who recently passed away. He was a big part of this presentation and kind of getting these concepts together.
I know that.
So,
Okay, so
I mean, unlimited. No team has unlimited resources, so good strategy gets you, good robot, and then therefore good execution. Yeah.
Note that it is a triangle, so like if you just screw up at the other two, strategy like it doesn't matter. If you have a bad design and your driver's bad, like you could have a good strategy. This is kind of the core way that we talk about games in a big picture historical context, is using dimensions. This is something that I stole from Austin at Citrus Circuits and made a giant spreadsheet of, where basically you can categorize different things that happen within the game, i.e., what does the end game look like? How is it scored? Is it a field state at expiration, or is it something else? Are game pieces exclusive to your alliance, or are they shared? What does the cycle path look like? I like to say it's like the Taco Bell approach to games, because when you break them down into a few of these, you're shoving things into bins a little bit. But when you break it down in these conditions, it's like the same, 10 different game features just mashed back together in different ways. It's a Taco Bell menu. And then we do have this all the way back, but it becomes pretty difficult to maintain relevance as you get earlier than about 2015, just because the technology has changed so much.
I should do a pre-kickoff prediction based off of those.
Ooh.
That's what we like to do with our kickoffs.
I like this.
What do you think the game's gonna be like?
So with the game piece hint, I think it's gonna be reverse stacking. So it's gonna be like hanging game pieces, and then the more you hang, the more points you get. Maybe you put something at the bottom. Yeah, like stack attack. Was it stack attack? No.
No, stack attack is just drive through the opponents.
What was the?
You're thinking recycle rush or stack attack.
No. It's a game design challenge game. So what I sent you guys.
Yeah.
Jungle
yeah.
Rumble or something.
Yeah.
What's your prediction?
Oh, I don't know. I just want to see a shooting game. That's all. I want to see a shooting game, and I want to see some crazy scoring system. But we just did that, so.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's a shooting game.
Yeah.
You can make every game a shooting
stacking
game.
or possession. Stacking, possession, mobility are the three we haven't seen in the longest amount of time. So.
Yeah, the problem is the game pieces are really expensive, so I'm like, it has to be something you can't just shoot. But
yeah.
Now that it's expensive, we don't know the quantity.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. But I don't know that they would charge you that much money for 1,000 ping pong balls.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, because it's like 1/6 of the field.
It's like 200. No, 400 or something.
Yeah, I don't know what it was.
I mean, the game pieces could be something like, what was it? Is it a 2000? It's like an early 2000s game where they're like the big rolling carts, and you have to push them to different areas of the field. Could be. Cool. But TLDR, GDC is not working with an infinite design space. Yeah, we all know they have to design games that everybody can play, that aren't horribly broken, scoring-wise or physical-wise. We gotta have a field we can put together, and then the every other year thing is I don't know, people don't think about it a lot, but you have two distinct groups that are working every other year to stay 1 year ahead, and so they're kind of pulling from one giant pool of concepts that they have that they like to use, but they're not gonna reuse things immediately back to back, for the most part. So looking at past games for guidance for the next one. Yeah, we've all done that. We're speculating about that right now. Cool.
Okay, so explain some of the dimensions we had. So a cap game, maximum number of points you can get. There's a few different types. Zero sum, so that's either there's a max score across both alliances, like 2015, or in 2018 where you're scoring. If you're scoring, then they're not. Basically, the point of this is focus on being first and get to that point quicker. There's exclusive and non-exclusive game pieces. So are you allowed to interact with opponent game pieces or not? And if so, then defense can become valuable depending on the field design. And then for this, you want to focus on being efficient. Misses will greatly affect it. There's a unlimited game, so may have an overflow mechanic we just talked about. They broke, but 2025 was a weird one where there was technically an overflow with the processor and like the human player capability. We didn't really see it till Chelsea Champs where they increased the number of algae. So I'll say for the official game there wasn't that, but there might have been a way to do it.
There's totally a way.
Yeah.
Nobody has done it yet.
Yeah, a little crazy. And then cycle speed is what matters in these kinds of games. So focus on being fast because time in a match is the greatest commodity. Other types of scoring, or within that limit, what other types of scoring are there? Single opportunity for cycle. You can only hold one game piece. This one again, don't drop it, don't miss it. Multiple opportunities for cycle. You want to be fast. You want to get as many of those cycles. So like 2020, you might not hit all 5 in the inner goal, 2020 you might not hit all of them in the inner goal, but you want to just try to get as many cycles as possible. Step scoring is a weird one, but basically you get points depending on if you do a few things. So like 2017, where the first gear and then the third gear, and then so doing every action might not yield the same linear amount of points. There's also bonuses. So time-based multiplier, so like 2018, you had it first, it's a time-based multiplier. There's also restricted time-based multipliers, so that's like 2024, where there was a few seconds where there was an increase. And then an additive bonus, which was like 2023, where you were getting bonuses for those links. So even if you didn't actually score as many game pieces as the opponents, as long as you talked with your alliance partners and was smart about which links to actually get, then you could probably win the match.
So the scoring capacity over time is a interesting game design concept that they've manipulated recently. So this year we have a game where the scoring capacity decreases over time. Most teams are going to start with their 4, 3, 2, 1. Sometimes the RP and qual matches, makes them go out of order. But each individual cycle adds less and less point to the total score. It's a very cool concept because it means that at high levels, every match is going to be somewhat close. So even if the scoreline is close, it may not have been a close match cycle count wise, just because one L4 is the difference of a bunch of L1s. So that's a cool game concept. It also means that if there's things that are worth different amounts of values, like say algae, maybe it changes the math a little bit as to when you want to start doing it. Consistent value game piece is more typical what we've seen in shooting games. Not much to say about that. It is what it is, exactly what you'd expect from just about any sport type game. 1 goal, 1 point, or 1 goal, 6 points plus 1 or 2. Yeah, great. Scoring capacity that increases in value, I hope we don't see this, but it would be really funny because it means most matches are just going to end in a blowout.
You say 2017 was an increase in value for the gears?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to get was it 3 for the first 50 points and 4 for the next 50 points and 5 for the next 50 points, and so to get that amount of gears was increasingly.
That's
yeah.
I guess a difficulty increase.
Difficulty increase in scales with. Like I'm just thinking, if you had one where it's like your first goal is 1 point, your second goal is 2 points, your third goal is that's where it gets into the please game design committee never do this.
Prerequisite tasks, so you got to do something in order to do another thing. Sometimes it could be self-imposed, sometimes it's not, but for these ones, these are all part of the game. So like you need to score a hatch so your ball doesn't fall out, or you need to remove certain algae to score a certain piece of coral. Point density, pretty standard density of points. I'm not going to explain that one. And then I think the general takeaways here is if it's used to score another game piece, then do it. If it gets points in and of itself, you could look into that as a specialist role, maybe at champs. And then if it does get bonus points, then skip until district champs or later down the season for most teams. And then so this is just autonomous and endgame, but autonomous usually multiplier of points, either a flat bonus or an actual multiplier. In multiplier games, it's probably better to do the hard goal, or like the one that gives you the greater amount of points. For a flat bonus, do the easy goal a lot. So if, for example, in 2025, you were a lot faster at L3 than L4, then there might be an argument to do 3 L3s instead of 2 L4s. But you have to think about it in terms of like, can I squeeze an extra cycle out of this? Versus just, I just want to do this because it's the easier one, because if you're not actually faster, then it doesn't really make sense. In capped games, autonomous usually gives that edge. So, when you're looking at a game and you're analyzing it, if it is a cap game, prioritize that autonomous because those points will never come back. And then obviously, end game is the most point dense. Don't do things in end game that don't help you in elims matches. So if it doesn't give you a significant amount of points, don't do it. The trap is a trap. We fell into that trap. Hopefully, we don't fall into that again.
All right, so cycle distances, probably one of the more obvious game features. How far you have to get a game piece across the field really affects how the game is played, and this is a massive rule of thumb. So this is going to depend on the game, but generally, if you have a full field game, you have to get a game piece from one end of the field to the other. You are now having to look at alliance-wide. How does that game piece get there? It's not just a single robot shuttling back and forth between a loading zone and a scoring area. It is how is the alliance as a whole getting as many game pieces across the field into the goal as possible. That's because when you have these kinds of games, a big chunk of your cycle is just transit. So if you can slice that down any way possible, you are increasing your numbers of cycles per match, you're increasing your points per second. There you go. Cool. So here's some examples. I wish I would put these in the other order because the 2013 and 2014 games are like brothers turned on their head. So in 2013, you had these frisbees. You could launch them all the way across the field, full field shot into the high goal. If you missed, no big deal. You have your 2 alliance partners up there who will pick it up off the ground, score it into the high goal. 2024, by rule, you couldn't do that. So the same strategy still works. You want to get as many game pieces across the field near the goal as possible, but you flip it on its head. You have 1 alliance partner up front who's doing all the collecting and scoring, and 2 who are doing a much shorter cycle to shoot it back to them for transport. One thing with this is you do have to account for the intake time, but intakes are so fast these days that with things that don't involve a complex handoff, intake time is just a minimal portion compared to driving across the field. On a weird angle, we saw the cube shooters in 2023 kind of become this cycle shortening thing where they would go, just touch the community, sometimes with a long stick, shoot the cube over near the low goal, not necessarily into the low goal, and then the high goal scoring robot, as it drove up to do its high goal cycle, would just kind of bump it in with its bumper as it's scoring that cone or cube up top. So by doing that, you are getting multiple game pieces for the price of 1 robot having to drive full length of the field. Compare that to like this year, where robots just kind of shuttle around between their nearest goals, their loading zone. These tend to involve a lot more alliance deconfliction than anything else. But some of these games with shorter cycle distances had that feature where it's 1 robot, 1 task. As far as accuracy is very year dependent, depending on how many game pieces you have and how much each goal is worth, how long does it take to load cycle. But generally, accuracy hurts you. Lack of accuracy hurts you more the shorter your cycle is. Cool. So strategic dependencies are another thing to pick up on when you're reading through a game manual. What do we have to do? Do we have to do this task to do another task? Sometimes it's part of the game. So this year you had to remove the algae before you could score some of those L2 and 3s. Some of them can be something that you are choosing to do. We will come back to this later. I'm going to grab that algae and just hang on to it for a minute, and I'll go do something productive with it later. And if you can kind of find all these dependencies or chains of dependencies in a game, that's something that you can optimize for. That's like, okay, you know, we need to do this, so we have to do this, we have to do this, forget everything else. Or alternatively, you know, okay, we want to do the, you know, the one thing, we want to do the trap. I don't know, because I hate the trap. You know, so we have to be able to shoot down. Great. How many other things does that drive dependencies that are going to set you up for failure later on? So this is one of the most interesting ones that we've stolen. This is the ball flow theory from 254, the cheesy proofs. And basically the idea is this: balls roll. Crazy. So when you score into the hub, which is the goal in the middle of the field there, it's returned randomly out to the field, right? And 3 out of 4 times, it's going to an area that's favorable or at least neutral to you. 1 out of 4 times, it's going into that red zone down there that is unfavorable. So the idea is, if you can get rid of those unfavorable ones, the odds are in your favor that they come back as a quote-unquote easy cargo later on. So if you can clean them up, you get easier game pieces to score, and that kind of increasing in value thing, not necessarily the value increasing, but the ease of each cycle decreases over time. Conversely, if you can force all your opponent's game pieces into that red zone, they're going to have one heck of a time cleaning them up. So it forces you to make a trade-off. There is a value that you can assign to putting an opponent's game piece all the way down there that makes it really annoying for them to score. And the question is, what's better? A high goal right now from, you know, somewhere that's really easy to pick up and shoot from, or forcing my opponent to drive all the way back in front of their own driver station and, you know, try to collect a ball. So that's a trade-off, and one to be aware of when you have a dependency like this, you know, with a randomized return.
We also saw some autos where you would hide the opponent ball behind. Yeah. That was a funny one, but yeah, there were some hiding autos too.
This is a dependency that we were a part of, designed in dependency by a team. So this is Citrus Circuits, this Code Orange and us at Aerospace back in 2019, and they had this triple climb. The idea is they put out 2 buddy ramps, you drive onto it with both alliance partners, everybody goes up together. This is extremely risky because it's a all or nothing bet. If you don't have both side robots there, you can't go up because it's unbalancing a flip over. So, you know, not only did they have to choose, and lucky for us it worked out, they had to choose alliance partners where the drivetrains would fit, but then you had to get everybody there. So after talking with them a while after this, you know, it was one of those where they sounded kind of on the fence whether they would do it exactly the same way again, just because it's such a high risk play, where you know, you have to, your second pick, your first pick and your second pick both have to make it back, or you're toast. I think, you know, from my opinion, this understand risk and rewards, reading into that conversation a little bit from their position as a team that, you know, has a very good shot at a 1 seed, very good shot at picking the next best offensive robot, this is probably an unnecessary risk. You know, they're going to have a high level climb, their partner's going to have a high level climb. You got to figure something out, you know, maybe to get a second pick that has a good climb on it too. But that might be easier than trying to do this. Conversely, if you're in that 5-6 seed spot, you know you're going to have to beat a team better than you. So you're going to have to gamble somewhere, and this would be a great design for that level. Now, Districts changes all this because you want to be more risk averse, but for in terms of winning a single competition, this is a better play for a team that's somewhere closer to the middle of the alliances than one that's, you know, squarely at the top. Cool. So 2025, we already talked about my favorite feature, which is diminishing returns. And Algae is a zero-sum game. So this goes back down the same alley of, you know, every game is going to have features in it that let you decide to gamble or not. And Algae is this year's feature for that. If you do like what we saw, you know, in Houston, where everybody's cleaning all the algae off the field ASAP, get them into the barge, the match is predictable, right? If you have one more algae than the other guy, we saw Strike Force, you know, do that cool algae steal, like, you know, it's kind of over. Everybody's going to have awesome L4s, awesome L3, awesome L2s, L1s might make the difference. If everybody just cleaned up their own algae perfectly, it's 2015. All you have to cheer for is your opponent to mess up. That said, if you do something like what Strike Force did, or use the processor like Bread did, now the game is a little bit more chaotic. Things can tip in either direction, and it may result in a good outcome for you if you're the underdog. I would not recommend doing this if you are the favorite. For what it's worth, if you're the favorite, you want a predictable match, everything to go down the rails, you're good. If you are underdog, chaos can only help you. You're already losing the match. It doesn't matter if you lose 200 to 100 or 101 to 100. Strategies like this will get you blown out every now and again. It's worth saying that caveat, but it also may give you a better chance to win a match you don't otherwise have a chance in. And then coming back to the half cycles, so this is that efficiency piece. We saw a relatively small number of teams, just because it's quite a geometric issue, doing what we call super cycles, where they would grab an algae, just hang on to it, go score their coral, and then when it's convenient for them, they could score the algae. Or you can look at it the other way around. They're trying to do the algae, and they just happen to be carrying a coral that they can do when it's convenient to them. So by doing that, you're getting kind of a 2 for the price of 1 compared to most other teams that can only hang on to 1 game piece at a time.
On kickoff, I was like, can we shoot the algae from the coral state or the reef? I guess I never saw that. But
you can.
We could have tried. So, yeah. 2024. So this is one of the cooler ones that we saw. Basically, the game, if you weren't familiar, was there's an amp time. So the amp itself is worth less points, but it can enable you to gain extra points during that speaker time for 10 seconds. And so it's a 2.5 points, 2.5 times the value, which means it makes it incredibly valuable. So basic goal of the match is get as many amp cycles as possible and maximize what you're doing during that amp cycle. And so that led to the rise of the double horde strategy. So the double horde strategy is there's 2 robots that do a super short cycle from the intake and then blob it over to a general area, and then 1 robot cleans up. So that makes you most efficient with your amp timing. And then obviously those hoarding robots could come over, bring 1 piece during that amp time. However, during Einstein, as 294 would know, they got countered. And how do they get countered? Well, there's a dependency on that 1 robot who's scoring. And so if that 1 robot gets defended, or if that clean cycle gets disturbed, then you're not going to be able to score as much. And so it's kind of like a rock paper scissors. But as you can see, so we just talked about the green one. The blue one beats the green one. So the defense beat that one. But 254 on nines, and you guys, they adapted, between each match, right? And so, okay, we have 1 robot defending us. We have this dependency on this 1 scorer. What should we do about it? Triple cycling is the answer. And so, if you have 3 robots cycling, because of the way the game's designed, you can get a higher volume of notes out, and therefore that lets you overwhelm the opponent. I think that was the right, for watching it, I think that was the right answer. But unlucky things happen. But another caveat here is this only really works if you have these higher capability robots, and so you can't really do a double horde, during your week 1 possibly, where teams don't either have the capability to even horde shot for you, or the teams that you're hoarding to can't efficiently do both the amp and the speaker. And so if that doesn't work, then there's no point in doing it. You might as well just stick to triple offense. The basic premise of this is how do we make sure that each team is at least doing something, and so that helps contribute to the overall match.
I would say so I tend to think about it the other way around, which is how do I make one of my opponent's robots just have nothing to do. If you are making your opponent's robot having nothing to do, you're right. You start as a 3v3. You give up 1 robot to cover one of theirs. Now it's a 2v2. If you can force it down to a 1.5v1.
And so this is just a quick map of the field, explaining how the field design played into this. So the intake zones down here, kind of 3 areas you have to get out of if you're trying to do a full field cycle. So you have to either go in between their speaker, in which case there was a protected zone right here. This was generally the path teams took, and then under the trench. If there was a defensive bot around that, could make it difficult. Because, however, once you're out of that zone, because the full field had so many different options, playing defense midfield would have been pretty difficult. And then in that hoarding zone, you do have a nice little protected zone, or you have a nice little zone that you could make protected, I guess, if you were in the amp side. But if you were, if your nodes were scattered not in that amp zone, it could be easily defended. Now, I think one thing to note is those protected zones, that you see marked down the field are not barriers that if you enter, you're, instantly gonna get fouled. it's more of a risk that you're taking, that hey, like, is there anywhere near me? Okay, I can go in there, do whatever. Oh, there's someone near me? Probably not. And so I think I see a lot of teams who are like, oh, I can't go anywhere near that because, you know, it's marked the other color. And that's usually not the case. You know, it's if there's a contact kind of thing.
So, go ahead.
I was gonna say if you go back to the slide, if you watch the 3 matches we played on the finals of Newton, you can see the evolution of the game, like, in real time happening in the match, where it was like, in particular between us and 2910, we were playing defense the first match, and we totally shut them down. So the second match, and we were anticipating this, they started to shuttle from the loading station, and then we baited them out by driving away, drew them out, and then came back and then defended them again. And then so on the third match, they said, we're not going to take the bait. They only shuttled from the loading zone, which then negated our defense, but then it enabled us to basically go back to our passer role, which is the role we played prior to that. And so that was all like in real time during the matches.
It's like you went all the way around the circle.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this game is probably one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Just from a strategic evolution perspective, and like seeing that, you know, at Houston was like that was really sick.
I think our little back row with the strategy group there, like watching like, oh no, another team fell to the defense trap. Oh no, Rembrandts are in danger. Oh no, Citrus in danger. You know, like
the one thing that we had, which was different, that we were able to do is 1323 could go from the loading station, would shuttle into the center of the field, and it was coordinated with the poofs, that the poofs would come into the center field, and they have that continuous shooter, so then it would cycle back to themselves, get the stash into the corner, and then go back and chase it.
Self-hoarding.
Oh yeah, self-hoarding. Wow, it
And
came
so
all the way around.
Yeah, and then 1690 is the one who, they got a couple of steals in the finals, and we ended up losing on a penalty with that first match. But yeah, the evolution of this game within game and then between games was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm really proud of the strategy group because we came up with at least 2 of the strategies on kickoff. I don't think we fleshed it out as neatly as, you know, we have it now. And I think we also didn't do a good enough job of calling out that, hey, maybe like hoarding won't really work at lower levels. So I think we were kind of like really locked into that idea, whereas like we probably should have recognized that maybe this is a strategy later in the season. But still, like the fact that the game offered this, I love it.
Definitely, brilliant game. So I think on that note, this is actually a really nice segue into this, because you know, that's one thing that so in our strategic framework, we start with, you know, the end of the season, what does, you know, the theoretically perfect alliance look like, and then, you know, work our way back from there. And I don't think we worked far enough back to realize that, like, no, this concept doesn't work at all in early weeks, because like obviously teams get better, but also the strategies get better. So like what you were talking about, where the strategy develops, you know, not just from competition to competition, but like match to match, that can go really fast. So, you know, different games will develop in different ways, but it's a confluence of both, right? The mechanically, the teams are getting better, they're optimizing more things, and as they're optimizing more things, they are having to change strategies to adapt to opponents that are, you know, doing it right back. So like 2022, you didn't really care about like your opponent's cargo at all until the end, because by the time you get to the end, everybody's great. Everybody can shoot well. Anybody can shoot from anywhere. You know, like you're not bothered really by defenders. You're just, you know, intaking the cargo and shooting it out super fast. So now, how far does my opponent have to cycle is the only difference I can make. Same thing, we already, I don't know, we killed 2024, but we can kill it again because it's such a great game. And then now, you know, we just saw that first week 1, week 2 of this past year, like everybody's just like, gotta do L4, gotta do L4. I will say some of the robots that underscoped and like did L3 actually did surprisingly good. But you know, then as the season went on, okay, so teams are filling up the reef. Now what? Do we do the net? You have, every now and again a team considers the processor, but that kind of fell by the wayside for reasons that I think are other than a pure meta evolution. But so as the season goes on, teams are getting better, their strategic understanding is getting better, and it's kind of playing this ping pong game with better physical robots enabling better strategies. Oh, great, there's more of these. So yeah, so in 2019, if you spec'd into a robot that could just do cargo, it was great for early weeks, right? You could put those null hatch panels on, don't get any points, but put the cargo in, great job. Problem is like you run out of runway, in that like once the hatch panels start mattering, because you every time you go out, you have to put the null hatch panels on. You're lowering the score max of the game, and like now you just can't keep up. So that's one of those kind of dependencies where like looking at it from a preseason, if you were going to pick one task to do, it should be the panels. Same thing that year, teams would at first ignore the highest rocket level. The intake zone and then the scoring zones were like almost the same height. So you could get away with like a really short stubby elevator or maybe some weird, I don't know what teams did for this.
Rigel arm.
Rigel arm. But that was a bad example. So you could get away with some kind of simpler robots if you just ignored that high level and then like, okay, we'll come back around to this later and get you through the early weeks. 2017 is like the biggest example of this, I can say, where like the gears were the only thing that really were important early on. They're worth a ton of points, even when you break it down into like, okay, the average points per gear, like as you make your way up to each of the turbine things spinning. What are they called? Is that what they're called? The airship. Once you get them spinning, you get points, and like so the average per gear might not be so great, but it's a really easy game piece, and nobody's finishing them off at first. By the time you get to the end of the season, everybody can do that. So now you have to have some kind of fuel mechanism. Even though it's not worth so many points, getting all those wiffle balls in looks really cool, and tips you over the top.
So that was all very theoretical and good, but like how do you actually put it into practice? So the main thing, or the main takeaway is designing for the end of your season. So design for the end of your season, think about it, and then pare down the functions later on. That's kind of the way I've thought about things. You could be playing a different role within your alliance from competition to competition, but it's a lot easier to plan in for the functionality and then decide not to implement it, or at least think about how to do it versus having for example, like for us, we had a funnel or like a ramp that was high up, and so if we had decided to go down to a ground intake, we wouldn't have been able to because the handoff is already so high. And so this is an example from Team 6328, Mechanical Advantage. Basically, talking to them, and what they did was they're like, okay, the end game is a ground intake, but let's not do one right now. Let's just have a funnel, but we'll make sure that the handoff is low. The bucket system is pretty good already, like how you guys had it earlier. So let's just do that, and then we'll add it later on. And so by doing this allows you to parallelize. And I'd say for the mentors here, it's try to find things that your students are passionate about and like make them go for it. Unfortunately, I think on our team last year, I was the ground intake guy. So there was no one student that was super passionate about it. We actually had students unpassionate about it. But either way, it's good if a student can drive that, and so they can take a project, have a little bit of mentor oversight, do it on the side, and then you can integrate it later on. You don't want to be in the situation where you're like, well, our handoff is right up here. We're gonna have to make this crazy, handoff system just so that we can get a ground intake. Because at that point, like, is it really faster? So that's the end of the presentation. This is the slide deck if you want it, so you don't have to take pictures of the slides or anything. And then so I'll do that.
And then we also have one more QR code for you.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy document. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints?
No, that's it.
That's pretty good.
I would also like to thank some of our strategy alumni back here who without whom this presentation wouldn't come together like this. So, good job, guys.
Were you able to get the link, or I can send it to you too?
Another thing I tell my team is essentially accept the challenge. Like, as good as it is to do all the strategic analysis and to have a concept of a strategy, often it's like, okay, first wants you to put a coral on the L4, okay. Dive straight into like, just accept that that's what you gotta do and just go start figuring out how to do it. Now that's obviously from a mechanical design standpoint, obviously depending on your resources, but that's at least how we approach it, because it's like, well, alright, well.
How does GDC want you to play this game?
So like they want you to climb on a cage. Alright, cool. Start figuring it out. Don't figure out if you need to do it. As much as this presentation is saying you need to do it, which I also agree with, but it's like, okay, if you're time constrained.
Right. Yeah. I would say that's like time constraint can be like, so my other team is really small, right? Like it's like 20 kids and they're all new. So like for that kind of thing, we're probably just doing exactly that. Like, cool, what's the high goal? We're doing that. Yeah, exactly.
For you guys, do you guys how high fidelity are the game pieces towards the beginning of the season?
The game pieces?
Yeah, or the field pieces, sorry.
Not following the question.
So okay, so for us, the cage we built at the start of the season, it wasn't like the full metal welded one.
Okay,
So
yeah.
our climb approach was like, we were led to believe like it would work, but then when we actually, tested it on a real cage, like out here, it was like,
Didn't work at all.
yeah.
For critical game pieces, we'll just buy it. So
Okay.
we just bought the cage from
Okay.
Mark.
Okay.
For all the other field elements,
Mhm.
we generally have the parent crew come in the first 2 weeks and they build up the fields and prioritize based off of what we think is going to be. Inevitably, we end up modifying them to be more reflective in some way, shape, or form. So like the barge, we didn't like the original thing. We didn't think it was sturdy enough, so we made it more robust. And then also the way the balls were bouncing in the middle of the
Yeah.
trough is we designed in that middle of the trough,
Mhm.
and then we just bought the net.
Okay.
So I think it's usually my first job is to not talk to the team, it's to go on Andy Mark and buy stuff.
Yeah.
And then so this one's the big spreadsheet with all the games in it. So
That's the other different QR code.
Yeah.
different QR code.
Got it.